Chapter 7. Amy woke me up early, and we left for Kratos. He invited us to join him in a simple breakfast of bread and apricot jam. We ate together, and then Amy went to the healer's yard. She didn't want Foray to doubt anything. Eder knocked at the door, and Kratos told him that he wanted to visit the tree circle, as he was feeling tired after days of continuous hard work. He promised to join us later, and we left for the forge. While Eder kept talking to me, I couldn't concentrate on his words. My mind was preoccupied. Occasionally, I nodded to pretend I was listening. The forge was full of people, busy working. They were repairing a cart used to ferry firewood from the forest to the stockpile, and a few other small jobs that were left pending while they were working on Foray's project. Soon, Amy arrived with instructions from Foray to arrange the metal structures following her drawings. She had left as Kratos reached to talk to Foray. Amy and I looked at the drawings curiously. I wanted to know what the final project would look like, but we were disappointed. The papers had no picture of the final product. It only showed how different parts came together. Amy shared instructions with the workers at the forge, and they started to place pieces in their proper places. As Amy supervised the workers, I stood under a shady tree with my back to the rough trunk. I watched absent-mindedly as the scattered pieces started to form a shape. As the last piece of the metal puzzle was carried closer to the almost solved figure, Eder joined me under the tree. I'd been thinking about Foray and Kratos constantly. What was happening there? Why did it take so long for Kratos to come? Was something wrong? There were too many what-ifs in my head, and every passing moment made me worry even more. I made a conscious effort to divert my attention away from Kratos. I had seen Eder use his wings during the dance last night. I asked him if he'd ever used them for longer flights. "Let's just say I don't use bridges to cross the river." He smiled, then continued more seriously. "We don't use the wings too often. They are delicate and precious. The most I've seen anyone fly is a few feet. We can glide much longer distances, though." I nodded. "What if the wings get damaged? Can the healer fix them?" "Yeah, she can. That's where the moonlight comes in. Amy must have told you about it." She hadn't. In fact, I had not seen the white tree chamber. Now I understood what was inside there. I asked Eder to tell me more about it. "Well, I'm not a healer. I might not explain it properly, but I understand that moonlight is the most precious of all the lights. It's quite challenging to acquire in large quantities, as it's only available during a full moon. Moonlight falls on the moonflowers, and the healer captures the reflected light. We keep the moonlight safe and use it only when necessary." "How is it used?" "Among other things, the healers have a special power. They can manipulate the moonlight. I've only seen it happen once." He paused as the workers dropped a piece with a loud bang. Eder went to inspect the structure. After some moments, he came back satisfied. "No harm done." "You were telling me how you saw moonlight being used." "Yeah, right. So one of the men fell off a tree during harvest time. His wing was badly injured. We carried him to the white tree chamber. Foray put her hand in a vial full of moonlight and brought it out as if it were a thread. She used some strange tools and built up the injured part all by herself. It was magic." Recalling the incredible event had lit up Eder's face. "The moonlight is special. Everything that has the moonlight threaded into it is alive. I have witnessed it. The wing of the poor man was as real as it could be. That's why it's so precious." It was incredible. I thought about the magical moonlight with wonder. Eder interrupted, asking if I would like an apricot. I said yes, and he pointed to the tree where the fruits hung. He was about to climb when I stopped him and offered to do it. I wanted to take a look around from the top of the tree. Eder agreed. Climbing the tree was easy. Once up, I glanced around and saw all the pieces of metal forming a familiar shape. I couldn't believe what I saw. The metal structure had a long, thin body, narrowing down to a whip-like tail. Large wings spread on both sides. On the front was a head with a flat snout. 2 holes in the head replaced the eyes. I was terrified to see a metal creature, much like a dragon. It was too large to recognize from the ground. The workers walked around it without noticing what it was. My mind worked fast as I quickly picked some apricots on my way back to the ground. I handed some to Eder. Should I tell Eder, or wait for Kratos to come? I couldn't decide. Foray arrived at the forge, pushing a wooden cart covered with a large cloth. Amy walked to her, and they started to inspect the metal creature. Eder went to Foray to see if she needed help. They spoke for a bit, and then Serenus continued the inspection of the parts. When she was satisfied, she announced that it was time for her to work, and she needed everyone to leave her alone. It would spoil the surprise, she insisted. The workers left slowly. I kept my eyes on the path leading to the village. Kratos would be here any minute, I hoped. Eder called me and pointed toward the village. He wanted me to leave. I walked over to him and asked about Kratos. Serenus had told Eder she had finally convinced Kratos to let her proceed. She informed him that Kratos was feeling tired and staying in the orange chamber, but would be back soon. Eder trusted Serenus' word. And Kratos had also told him that he was feeling tired, so he had no reason to doubt her. But it frustrated me. I needed to talk to Kratos to see if he knew he had made a dragon. I accompanied Eder back to the village center and sat there quietly, waiting for Kratos to come. The yard was noisy and busy. A large group of trainee foragers surrounded Eder, asking questions about the project. He was happy and went into a detailed description of the techniques they had used. I listened without any interest and kept glancing at the guardians stationed outside the trees. The sun rose higher in the sky. The day turned into a pleasant one, white, fluffy clouds floating in the blue sky. The cool breeze gradually picked up pace and scattered the delicate flowers fluttering off the trees. The beautiful scenery did nothing to calm me down. I was drained from worrying about Kratos and the realization at the forge. I wanted to go see him immediately. I decided to try my luck with the guardians, hoping they would let me see Kratos. Eder, I'm going for a walk, I said, and walked away. Eder nodded as he turned his attention back to his audience. I headed to the orange tree and asked the guardians if I could see Kratos. To my surprise, they said he wasn't there. I thought he might be in another chamber. I went to all the trees, one after the other, but the guardians said the same thing every time. Kratos had not come to any tree. I began to panic. Why did Serenus lie about him coming here? An unknown fear crept into my thoughts. Was Kratos in some kind of danger? I needed to find him immediately. I went to look for him in Serenus' home. Maybe he went to talk to the white-haired lady. Once there, I waited outside for a bit, wondering if the white-haired lady was inside. I didn't know if she could harm me if I encountered her. A soft moaning came from inside. There was something wrong. I couldn't figure out who it was. The sound came again. I went forward, opened the door carefully, and gasped with horror. Kratos lay motionless on the floor. I rushed to his side and called his name, but he did not answer. He was unconscious. My mind was numb with fear and worry. I kept saying his name over and over again, but he remained unresponsive. An idea flashed through my disoriented thoughts. I had to take Kratos to one of the tree chambers. Serenus had told me the lights could heal the body and mind. He might recover if I quickly brought him to the right tree. I tried to remember. Red lights for ailments of blood. Orange was good for... I couldn't recall. I tried to pull him up. He was very heavy, but I didn't stop. I kept trying, straining my muscles till I could bring him in a position where I could drag him along. Once outside, I screamed at the top of my lungs for the guardians to come. They ran over, moved me aside, and carried him toward the trees. I followed along nervously. One of the guardians whistled, and more ran toward the healer's home. I stayed with the guardians who were carrying Kratos to the orange tree. They carried him inside the tree, but didn't allow me inside. I ran to get Amy and found her coming toward the village. As usual, Serenus had told her to leave. I pulled her toward the orange tree as I told her about Kratos. She ran to the tree and disappeared inside as I waited outside with the guardians, my breath heavy from anxiety. The guardians searched Serenus' home, and the commotion of the guardians' whistles attracted everyone in the village center. I found Eder looking at me and signaled him to come. He ran past the guardians and reached me. What happened? I was out of breath, and my legs could no longer carry me. I collapsed to the ground. Eder sat down with me and held my hand to comfort me. Finally, I found my voice. I told Eder what had happened. As soon as he understood what I was saying, he ran toward the tree chamber, but the guardians held him back. He stood there, rubbing his hands uneasily. Newly arrived guardians stopped more Seren from coming over to the trees. I waited patiently to hear some news from Amy. Eder was also sitting on the ground now. The guardians searching the healer's home had finished, but did not find the old lady. They ran toward us and surrounded me. Their commander came forward and asked me how I knew that Kratos needed help. I told him I had heard him moaning. He wasn't satisfied with my answer. He wanted to know why I was roaming around near the healer's house. I said, I was looking for Kratos. Eder told me he was resting in a tree chamber, but the guardians outside all the chambers told me he wasn't there, so I thought he might be at Ferre's home. Eder nodded in agreement. The guardians backed away. A loud swishing sound made everyone turn toward the village center. For a minute, everyone became quiet, trying to understand the sound. Then screams echoed through the village. The peace of the day became a forgotten thing. Everyone ran around to get a clear view of what was happening. As we exited the tree circle, I saw the frightful monster in the sky. The giant creature hovered high above the forge, flapping its wings slowly. I looked at it in horror as the screaming Seren started to run away. I froze in terror. The monstrous creature stayed where it was, simply flapping its wings. Gold and silver scales covered its huge body, shimmering in the sunlight. Its long tail cut through the air with an angry swish. Suddenly, the trees close to the monster caught fire. The beast stooped low and caught the trunks of the burning trees with its iron claws. It pulled them out of the ground, and with a thrust of its long and powerful wings, it flew toward the village. The villagers screamed in panic and ran in different directions to escape the imminent danger. I ran and took cover behind the healer's home, but couldn't stop myself from peeking out to see what was going on. The guardians ran toward the forge and whistled for more guardians to come. The bell in the village center was ringing, announcing the threat. The burning trees came like arrows to the village. Wooden houses provided fuel to the eager flames, and they spread around, eating everything they could find. More and more guardians appeared and shot arrows at the beast, but with a quick flap of its wings, the villain flew away, leaving its fiery army behind to devour the village. The past few moments had changed the peaceful village center into a war zone. I rushed toward the magical trees to see if everyone was safe. There were still guardians outside. They had not left their stations. Then, I ran to the village where the burning trees had fallen. A large tree was sprawled over an unfortunate house. Its branches spread all over the front garden, while the thick roots stretched toward the sky like a bony hand. Then, with a loud noise, the roof collapsed under the weight of the tree. I looked around with a numb feeling. The beautiful village was broken, burnt, and wasted all around me. It was unrecognizable. The wooden furniture in the village center was on fire. Black smoke rose from the burning houses around it. It must have been late afternoon, but the sky turned dark with smoke and gray clouds that blocked the sunlight. A storm was coming. A deafening silence echoed through the village amid the shuffling of running steps and the urgent words of people trying frantically to put out the fire. But the flames were angry. Hungry, they wanted to eat everything they could reach. The flames licked at the house next to me. The heat was too much. I moved away from it, keeping my eyes on the ground. The smoke rising from every side made it difficult to breathe. The cough hurt my lungs, and I sat down, hugging myself tightly. Then, I saw someone running toward the village center. It was Eder. I shouted loudly to let him know where I was. We ran toward each other, and I looked at him, waiting to hear about Kratos. His face told the story of the horror that surrounded us, but he was relieved to find me safe. Eder wanted me to go with him. I followed quickly and without question. As we walked away from the burning village center, I kept looking around in disbelief. It was unbelievable how much destruction had taken place in such a short time. The healer's yard was full of people. Many wooden cots had materialized, carrying the injured being taken to the chambers by the lucky survivors. We threaded our way through the groups of men and women standing together with empty eyes. They kept looking around nervously. I was worried about Kratos and couldn't wait any longer. Eder, how is Kratos? Eder's words were full of worry.
Amy has moved him to the Moontree chamber. No one is allowed to see him.
He took me to the Red Tree. Amy was already there, busy with some injured people. As we stood there, more and more wooden cots appeared. A girl was helping Amy. An assortment of jars with powders and liquids of different colors filled the tabletops. It was getting crowded. Amy announced that everyone not injured should go to the Blue Tree. Her helper informed her that it was already full. Villagers were agitated and needed to calm their minds. Amy said loudly, "If you are not hurt, go to the Green Tree. The green light will soothe your senses. I will be there shortly." I left with Eder and a few others for the Green Tree. Boris was walking to Ferre's house with more guardians. They looked alert, moving slowly. I wondered if they had found the old lady. Eder pushed back the green curtain to let me in. Some people were sitting inside, but there was plenty of room here. No one looked up as we entered. We found a quiet corner and sank to the ground side by side, with our backs to a thick trunk carrying the green ceiling. I watched as the cool green light washed over me. It gently touched my mind, soothing it. I was on edge and looking around frantically, but the light had started to work its magic. I closed my eyes, took a few deep breaths, and felt my head become lighter, more focused. After a few moments, I opened my eyes and looked around with a fresher mind. Eder was also looking better. I closed my eyes again. It seemed like a lifetime had passed since Foray had stood there with me, excitedly talking about how the green light provided clarity to an anxious mind. After all, it is nature's most preferred color. She had turned around to smile at me. I shook her image from my mind. I didn't want to think about her, not after what she'd done. The cracking of thunder brought me back. Amy was there with us. I had not seen her come in. I asked, "Amy, how's Kratos?" "I am not sure. Kratos is not injured. Nothing is broken, but he is still unconscious. I've tried everything I know, but nothing worked. We are keeping him in the moon tree, but we need to figure out what happened." She turned toward Eder. "I need your help. Since Foray is not—" She stopped in mid-sentence. Her eyes started to fill with tears, and she rubbed them off with her hand. "Eder, please go and bring Alev here. She might be able to help us." Eder left quickly. Amy sat down on a bench and rubbed her forehead slowly. She was tired. I let her rest and sat on the bench next to her. She looked at me after a while and said softly, "I am so glad you went after Kratos. Whatever happened to him affected his heart. The orange light gave him strength and kept his body warm. You may have saved his life." I nodded and hoped she was right. Amy left to check on the injured. Eder hadn't returned yet. The waiting would have been vicious if I hadn't been in the chamber lit in dim green. I put my head down on the table and closed my eyes. It felt good. Footsteps approached me and I slowly looked up. It was Boris, the head guardian.
"You are needed at the healer's house. Come with me,"
he said soberly. Outside the chamber, it was already dark, with the gray clouds taking over the blue sky. The fire burned brightly in the tall torches erected all around the yard. The air smelled of smoke, and a glance toward the village revealed the source. Boris told me that the fires had been put out. Some people were injured, and others were shocked, but no one had died. The yard was almost deserted now. I followed Boris to the healer's house. Once inside, I saw an elderly man sitting in a chair beside Alev, who sat with a blanket covering her legs. Eder sat on one side. Boris offered me a chair next to Eder and pulled himself one too. I sat nervously under the steady gaze of the elders. Alev started. "This meeting has been called to make sense of the incident. Eder considers you to be innocent. We believe his word, but can't leave anything to chance. I have to ask you to go through the details of how you came to find Kratos." I told them everything I had told Kratos the previous night, and then about how I found him in the healer's home. Eder was in shock, as he knew none of it. The elders noticed it, and Alev demanded proof that I was telling the truth. I told them that Amy was with me last night when I went to tell Kratos about the white-haired lady. Boris left to get Amy, and I noticed the burning stare from Eder. He was disappointed in me. He had trusted me, but I had kept everything from him. We were together all day, yet I revealed nothing. I tried to explain myself. Kratos asked me not to tell anyone. Eder crossed his arms and looked away. Amy arrived, and the elders asked her to tell them about last night's meeting at Kratos' home. She narrated the same story that I had told them. The elders asked more questions, and we responded honestly. When they were satisfied, Alev demanded that I repeat the conversation between Foray and the old lady. I told them all I knew. They sat silently, brooding over what I had told them. The older man asked Alev to voice her opinion. She answered in a gruff voice, "Jinyin, I'm afraid it must be Esmeray trying to achieve what she couldn't the last time." Everyone gasped in horror. The room's atmosphere changed. Its grim, sad tone turned into one vibrating with anxiety. The elders exchanged glances and started whispering urgently amongst themselves.